a Washington state couple isn't seen or heard from in months. When a welfare check is finally performed at their home, investigators find their bodies in a freezer along with handwritten notes describing their deaths. Officials now say the couple's son and his girlfriend lived in the home for months as their dead bodies were stored in the freezer. The details of this case are almost too out there to believe. They sound like something out of a movie, but they're not. This really happened. This case takes place in Puyallup, Washington, not too far from Tacoma. That's where 68-year-old William Vosler lived with his wife, 66-year-old Eileen Vosler. And for a time, the couple's son, 33-year-old Shane Vosler, also lived in the home with his girlfriend, 34-year-old Sue Bin Lee. I just threw a lot of names and ages at you, so let's simplify it just a bit. A married couple lived in the home with their adult son and his girlfriend. That alone seems normal enough. What was out of the ordinary, though, is that neighbors stopped seeing Eileen and William around the house. Neighbors say they had seen the couple going in and out in the past, and William was often in the driveway working on his vehicle. But other than that, both William and Eileen kept to themselves, so their disappearances weren't reported, at least for a while. Eventually, a series of welfare checks were called in, and first responders came to the house to check things out. There were 3 welfare checks in all, including one in November, made after Sue, that's the girlfriend, made a worrisome post on social media. She wrote that she was considering suicide with Shane. Concerned for her mental health, someone saw the post and called for another check of the home. Everything seemed normal there. There were no signs that someone was in danger inside the house, so sheriff's deputies didn't go inside. The first time anyone went inside was on New Year's Eve, December 31st. William and Eileen had 2 other sons, so they were the ones who brought the house keys and unlocked the door. One of the sons went inside first and quickly came running out, saying there was a body on the floor with blood. This body was later determined to be Sue Bin Lee, who medical examiners say died from a gunshot wound to the head. Pierce County Sheriff's deputies then got a search warrant and once inside found 2 more bodies belonging to William and Eileen. They'd been stored in the garage freezer. On the outside of the freezer were 2 handwritten notes reading, quote, "Time of death, July 24th, 5:45 a.m. And the other note read, quote, "Time of death, July 24th, 3 p.m. Medical examiners later determined that William's cause of death was a stab wound to the chest and blunt force trauma. Eileen's cause of death was multiple stab wounds to the chest and neck. The manner of death for both parents was homicide. So who murdered William and Eileen? The investigation quickly shifted to their son Shane, who was found in an upstairs bathroom. Investigators determined Shane died by suicide after shooting himself in the head. But there are still so many questions. Investigators don't know a motive in the murders of William and Eileen, and they can't say for sure how Sue died. They know her cause of death is being shot, but manner of death is still a question mark. It's unclear whether she shot herself or if Shane shot her, so her manner of death is listed as undetermined. It's also unclear what role Sue played in the murders of William and Eileen. Sheriff's deputies say Shane was definitely involved, but they can't confirm whether his girlfriend was too. What we do know is that both Shane and Sue continued to live in the home for months while the bodies of William and Eileen sat in the garage freezer. Hey guys, I have to pause this video just for a second to tell you about something I know you want to hear. It's called Upside. It's this free app that gets you cash back on daily essentials like gas and groceries. I started using Upside every time I get my gas, and I love it because it's easy and it's free. And of course, there's the cash back. Here's what you do. Download the Upside app and then buy whatever you planned to purchase. Log it in the app and that's it. You get cash back. To see how much you could earn, click the link in the description to download Upside or scan the QR code that's on your screen and use our promo code LCNews to get an extra 25 cents back on every gallon on your first tank of gas. We've got another interesting and upsetting story to talk about today. And for that, we're going to turn to former NYPD detective Tom Smith. Once a detective, always a detective, Tom. And I'm asking you, if you were called to the scene, how would you start your investigation?
Oh God, this is one out of a horror movie. When you get there, and once you get into the apartment, you have to. I was always taught as a young detective, when you go into a crime scene, put your hands in your pockets and don't touch a thing, and just kind of look around and give it a brief overview of what you got, where certain bodies are. but you want to take your time with going through the apartment. Obviously, you want to make sure there's no danger to the responding officers or anyone else that might be in the apartment, any survivor or the house, any survivors, anyone that needs medical attention. So you have to do that first. But then it's the preservation of that crime scene is vital. And when you have a house or an indoor crime scene, it's actually pretty easy because all you're going to do is walk outside and close the door and no one goes near the house. So the preservation of the crime scene is the most important thing you can do in this situation.
I think what jumped out to me about this case is that we have two people who were murdered and then they're put in the freezer. I don't think I've ever covered a case like this. I've seen things like this on a Desperate Housewives episode, for example. That's what my mind goes to, movies or TV. Is this something you've ever come across before?
No, not at all. Like you said, this is a book, this is a movie, this is a Netflix series. Uh, you don't come across these, but you have to be ready for everything. When you're a cop, you have to be ready for any possibility of a crazy call like this. And when you're a detective, you're waiting for something like this to one day happen. And for these guys, it did.
So, to me, thinking about these bodies being in the freezer, it seems like preservation, maybe perhaps so that if the bodies were left out, they wouldn't start to decay, there wouldn't be a smell, the people wouldn't have to deal with them who murdered them. I mean, what do you think was the reason for putting them in the freezer?
Well, so no one knows about it. If you get them out of the house and you go dig a grave, dig, whatever, or get rid of the body somehow, they're going to be found one way or another. And then that leads to an investigation. Whereas if they just stick them where they did in a freezer, all it is at this point is a question by neighbors, question by family members. Oh, have you seen them? Where they've been? Instead of a, onslaught of an investigation if they happen to get them out of the house. So that's the reason for doing that.
Do you think it makes it more difficult in terms of the investigation that these people were frozen as far as what time of death or things that could have been involved in their body? They've now been frozen. It could make things more tough.
Well, it depends on the medical examination, what they can get out of it. They do miracles. Medical examiners are absolutely talented people who can get to the bottom of homicides and causes of death better than anyone. And the smallest little thing on a body can lead them down that road to make a determination. So I don't think that's going to play a big part in it because of the technology today and the talent of medical examiners.
You're right. We talked to a lot of medical examiners on Law and Crime, and they do a fantastic job, things that I couldn't even imagine. But in this case, if the Emmy wasn't able to pinpoint the time of death or whatever, they have a note that was written on the freezer with the time of death, the date that it happened, seemingly written by the son in this case. The parents were in the freezers, and then his handwritten note was on top of them talking about time of death. What do you make of that he took the time to note when it happened and not necessarily why, but the time and the date?
Yeah, it's weird. The exact reason for doing that, I don't know. Whether it's just you know a this is going to sound weird, but a respect thing that it's his parents, and he just wants to make sure everyone knows what happened to them and the time it happened. It's weird, weird saying that, but that could be a reason. But you're going to, you have a starting point now with that. You're going to do a handwriting analysis of any other paperwork you can find in the house that matches maybe the son. So really to pinpoint, okay, he's the one who wrote those notes. And then you could start on a timeline either way with those times and dates being a starting point.
Another crazy part of this case is the fact that these people were killed back in July. They were in the freezers for several months, and the son and his girlfriend continued to live in the home with these bodies in the freezer, still going about their day, doing whatever it is they're doing. To me, that's very crazy. Not only to have the bodies there, but then to continue living there. And I'm assuming this may have been the crime scene too, for where they were murdered. What do you make of that? The fact that they just stayed there and the bodies were in the garage?
Yeah, that's some cold. I don't mean to say this cold stuff, but that's a entirely different psychological profile, a psychological meaning of what was going through these people's minds and heads when after the crime and then just staying there with them. That's something that we rely on psychologists for to analyze that type of thinking and really deep down maniacal way to do things. Not even just two bodies, but it's your parents, which makes it even more kind of diabolical.
You're right. I do feel like it's an added layer whenever someone kills their parents or children. It just is an added layer of depravity. So definitely we're seeing that in this case. I'm also wondering if investigators were going to try to find out a motive. For instance, I went on the son's Facebook page, just going through it generally, and he had some posts about his dad. Like his dad got a new truck and he took a picture and was like, "Hey, check out my dad's truck." Like it seemed like something very nice that you would see a son posting about his dad, not someone who would shoot his dad, kill him, actually, I believe stabbed and blunt force trauma to the head, and then put him in the freezer. It just doesn't seem like it would add up. Do you think investigators then would go through and look, why would he have done this? Search for a motive?
Oh, sure. And you're on the right track, Sierra. You know, you're going to do the deep dive into social media. That's going to be where it is. And any other writings, you know, you're going to go through his room. You're going to see if he wrote anything down. For some reason, when things like this happen, everyone has a journal. I don't know why, but it always pops up that there's a journal or a diary. So they're going to maybe try to find that and have a deeper understanding of what was going on in that house. You're also going to start interviews of family members and neighbors and all that to try to get an outside view of what was going on with the relationship in that family.
Talking about neighbors, these are some of the people who first raised the red flag that something was off because they stopped seeing the parents coming and going, working on their vehicles in the driveway. They just weren't seen for several months. And according to the reports that I've seen, police or first responders were called to the home multiple times before these bodies were found for a wellness check, but they weren't able to go inside. Why is that they couldn't enter?
Well, because there's no immediate danger. You know, it's just a neighbor, and I don't mean to say it like that, but it's just a neighbor making a call saying, "Hey, I haven't seen someone." So the immediacy or the exigent circumstances of going in aren't there. And that's why later on, what happened with getting family members to assist them is why that took place, because they can go in without a problem to see what's going on. But it's just the circumstances of not raising it to that danger level enabling police officers just to go into a home.
Yeah, the two parents had multiple children, and two of the other sons came, as you said, unlocked the door. They went inside, and one of these sons came rushing out saying, "There's blood, there's someone on the floor." And when officers go in, they find, of course, these bodies in the freezer, but then the son has killed himself, and then his girlfriend is also dead too. So now we have a murder suicide on our hands. And to me, that makes things even more complicated because the person who committed these murders is now dead. We can't perpetrate, but we can't even ask any questions about why everything happened. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. And, you know, when it comes to something like this, you come up with just a theory, and that's what it's going to be. You know, detectives are going to go and still, you know, even though everybody's dead, you still have an investigation because you have to make sure of what the facts are, that no one else was involved, someone didn't get away and do this. So you still continue the investigation, even though it seems that everyone that is dead was somewhat involved, especially the son and the girlfriend. And then, you know, you're going to close the case at some point and you're going to theorize what happened. And the theory comes from the investigation, the medical examiner, crime scene investigations of when things happened, where blood spatter was, when, you know, gunshot wounds, were they self inflicted, weren't they? You know, all things like that are going to lead and enter into the theory that's going to inevitably close this case.
And it does sound like the medical examiner there in Washington state did a fantastic job determining what happened to each of these people. There is still one question mark, though. So we know the two parents, their manner of death is homicide, blunt force trauma, and then stabbing. But then the two, I don't want to say children, they were grown adults, but their son and then his girlfriend, they died from gunshot wounds. So the son, apparently it was a suicide. But the girlfriend, we don't know. They haven't ruled anything. We can't say whether he shot her, the boyfriend, or if she shot herself. Why is that we don't know her manner of death?
Maybe just I mean, again, not getting too graphic, but the entry wound of, in her, maybe it's tough to precise an angle, the direction, how far away a weapon might have been, powder burns that are around the wound. All of that might have been tough to really nail down exactly what it was. And medical examiners fall into this sometimes. Yeah, maybe not, kind of a 50-50 thing, is not unusual. That does happen. So I'm just guessing that's what had happened in this case.
Still some questions in this case, and unfortunately, a lot of them we won't ever have answers to. But for what we do know, Tom, thanks for coming on and talking to us a bit more about the case.
No, it was my pleasure. Always nice to come on and talk to you about these really, really interesting cases, and this is one of them.
Washington investigators believe no one else was involved in the murders of William and Eileen Vosler. So the case has now been closed because investigators say no charges can be filed. Reporting for Law&Crime, I'm Sierra Gillespie.